Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive deep into a topic that might just blow your mind.
I'm ready. I love a good mental workout.
Excellent. Today we're tackling something you probably don't think about too often, metamentation, that wild ability to think about thinking.
It's like having a mind within a mind, right?
hmm
Pretty wild when you stop and consider it.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we're going to explore a pretty intriguing angle, how this human superpower might have actually sprung from something deeply social.
Our need to understand what's going on in other people's minds.
Precisely. Our guide for this mental adventure is Radu J. Bogdan's Minding Minds, Evolving a Reflexive Mind by Interpreting Others.
Ah, yes, Bogdan. He really delves into some fascinating territory in that book, evolutionary biology, psychology, philosophy, all to try and understand how our minds work.
Right, and one of the things that really struck me was the idea that primate intelligence, which forms our foundation, might have actually evolved more for navigating social landscapes than for using tools.
Yeah, there's this common misconception that our complex human brains evolved mainly for using tools. But the book challenges that, suggesting that being able to accurately interpret social signals was actually more crucial for survival.
So instead of mastering the physical world, our brains were busy figuring out the social world.
Precisely. Those early primates who could figure out who to trust, who posed a threat, who might be a good ally, they were the ones most likely to survive and pass on their genes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how does interpreting someone's actions, say, like figuring out if they're being friendly or aggressive, lead to the ability to reflect on our own thoughts?
That's the million-dollar question. Bogdan proposes that this constant act of interpretation, of trying to decipher the motives and intentions behind people's actions well, that laid the groundwork for something much more profound.
Okay, so are we talking about mind reading here, like actually knowing what someone else is thinking?
Not quite. It's more nuanced than that. It's less about knowing exactly what's going on in someone's head and more about building a working model of how their mind operates. Bogdan uses the term naive functionalism to describe this.
All right, naive functionalism. What exactly is naive about it?
It's naive in the sense that it's an early intuitive understanding of how minds work, almost like we're seeing minds as these little machines that take in information, process it according to certain rules, and then generate beliefs and desires and intentions.
So it's like we're trying to figure out the software running in someone else's head, even if we don't know the exact code.
Exactly, and here's where things get really interesting. This ability to see minds as systems, even if it's a simplified view, is a crucial stepping stone toward metamentation.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the connection.
Yep.
But how do we go from understanding other minds as systems to understanding our own? That seems like a huge leap.
Oh, it's a massive leap, and it's a leap that Bogdan argues is unique to humans. And one key factor he points to is our extended childhoods compared to other primates.
Right? That long period of dependence on caregivers, that intense bonding experience, it definitely sets us apart.
It does. That extended childhood allows for so much more social learning and development of the sentimental bond, as Bogdan calls it.
And this bond goes way beyond just physical needs, right? It's about that deep emotional connection between a child and their caregivers.
Absolutely. It's through that constant back and forth of emotions and experiences that the foundation for interpreting others gets laid. Human babies and mothers literally regulate each other's internal states through this bond, a process that seems to be unique to our species.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's like we're hardwired for empathy from day one.
In a sense, yes. That constant exchange within the sentimental bond is about figuring out another person's internal state. The baby learns to interpret the mother's cues, and the mother does the same with the baby.
So it's a constant feedback loop of interpretation.
You got it. And as we get better at interpreting others, those skills eventually turn inwards. We begin applying that same interpretive framework to our own thoughts and feelings.
It's like we're taking the tools we developed for understanding others and using them to understand ourselves.
Precisely. And that is a critical step towards metamentation. We start seeing our own minds as systems with inputs and outputs. We recognize that our thoughts and feelings aren't just random things, they're products of this internal system.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But there's got to be more to this,
Okay.
right? How do we go from just recognizing that our minds are systems to actually thinking about our thinking?
Right. There's more to unpack here. And to really understand that next step, we need to dive into the world of imagination and topical predication. Bogdan introduces these concepts, and they're fascinating.
All right, those are some big words. Break it down for us. What exactly is this imagination all about?
It builds upon our ability to interpret others. Imagination is the capacity to imagine scenarios involving other people's thoughts and feelings. It's more than just picturing a situation, it's about understanding how others might think and feel within that situation.
So let me see if I get this. It's like when I'm preparing for a job interview and I'm mentally playing out different scenarios, imagining what the interviewer will ask and how I'll respond.
Exactly. You're not just picturing yourself in the room, you're trying to anticipate the interviewer's mental state, their expectations, their reactions. You're essentially imaginating the interaction.
Wow, that's really interesting. So by mentally rehearsing these complex social interactions, we're training our brains for metamentation.
Precisely. And that's where topical predication comes in. It's more fundamental, it underpins both language and our ability to think about thoughts. It's the mental act of taking a topic, could be anything, an object, an event, an idea, and making a comment about it.
So even before we can speak, our minds are already doing this.
That's the idea. It seems simple, but it's the groundwork for understanding word meanings, forming sentences, and eventually reflecting on our own thoughts. That movie, totally overrated. Topic, comment, it's the building block of complex thought.
I'm starting to grasp this. These seemingly simple mental processes can lead to something as profound as metamentation. But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to uncover. We've just scratched the surface here. To truly understand metamentation, we need to explore how our thinking matures beyond the here and now, how we learn to step outside our own immediate experience and truly grasp the minds of others.
I'm ready to go deeper. Bring on part 2 of this mental journey. Let's explore how we evolve to understand not just our own minds, but the minds of others as well.
Buckle up. It's about to get even more fascinating.
Okay, so we've laid some groundwork, explored how interpreting other minds sets the stage for metamentation, and even touched on how those extended childhoods we humans have play a part. But how do we actually move from this basic understanding of other minds to truly stepping outside of our own perspective?
Well, that's where understanding false beliefs comes in. It's a really crucial milestone in this whole process.
False beliefs. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that even mean in this context?
Essentially, it's about recognizing that someone can hold a belief that doesn't match up with reality.
Aha, so it's like realizing that the world inside someone's head isn't always a perfect reflection of what's actually happening in the world outside.
Exactly. You see, children develop this understanding gradually. At first, they tend to assume that everyone sees the world the same way they do. But as they mature, they start to grasp this really important concept that other people can have different beliefs, even beliefs that are demonstrably false.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties in. But what kind of impact does this false belief understanding have on our developing minds?
Oh, it's a huge leap. It pushes us beyond simply reacting to what we observe and into the realm of actually inferring what's happening inside someone else's mind. And this realization that minds can hold representations that differ from reality is really a cornerstone of metamentation.
So it's like realizing that people aren't just reacting to the world, they're reacting to their own internal models of the world, which might not always be accurate.
Precisely. And this understanding of false beliefs really deepens that naive functionalism we were discussing earlier. We start to see how those internal models can sometimes be flawed, leading to actions or beliefs that might seem illogical to us.
It's like we go from seeing a mind as a simple machine to appreciating its complexities and its potential for error.
You got it. We start to grasp that the mind is constantly making predictions, interpreting data, and updating its models based on new information. And sometimes those models just get things wrong, which, is part of being human.
It makes you wonder, though, how do we even begin to make sense of all this complexity? It seems like understanding other minds would require a massive amount of mental effort.
It does, but our brains are pretty amazing, right? They've evolved some really remarkable tools to handle this complexity. One of the most fascinating, according to Bogdan, is a process called reconstruction.
Reconstruction. Okay, that sounds intense. What are we reconstructing exactly?
Imagine you're trying to make sense of a really complicated social situation, maybe a family argument, a political debate, even just a misunderstanding between friends. You're not just dealing with individual thoughts and feelings, you're dealing with a whole web of interconnected mental states.
Ooh, it's like trying to untangle a giant knot of thoughts and emotions.
That's a great way to put it. And that's essentially what reconstruction is all about, untangling that knot. It's the ability to piece together all those individual bits of information, glimpses into people's beliefs, desires, intentions, and assemble them into a coherent narrative.
So we're not just observing isolated mental states. We're building a mental model of how those states are interacting, how they're influencing each other.
Precisely. We're trying to construct a story that makes sense of the situation, taking into account not just what people are thinking, but how those thoughts are connected, how they're causing and reacting to each other.
That's amazing. But seriously, how do we even begin to do that? It seems like such a daunting task.
It is complex, but remember all those foundational skills we talked about earlier, interpreting others, understanding false beliefs, that early naive functionalism, they all come into play here.
So it's like all these individual skills are converging to create something much more powerful, something that allows us to navigate the complexities of social interaction.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Bogdan argues that reconstruction isn't just about understanding social situations. It's actually shaping the way our minds work more broadly.
Hold on, I need to catch up.
Oh,
So you're saying that my ability to, let's say, write a poem or solve a math problem is somehow connected to my ability to understand a complex social interaction.
that's the idea. Bogdan proposes that the cognitive skills we hone through reconstruction, abilities like juggling multiple perspectives, tracking cause and effect, and seeing patterns in complex systems, well, those skills actually contribute to our overall cognitive flexibility and problem-solving prowess.
That's incredible. So our social lives are basically training grounds for all sorts of mental challenges. Who knew small talk could be so beneficial?
Right, it's like a mental workout. But there's another really important layer to this reconstruction process that's particularly relevant to metamentation, its role in creating a sense of a unified mind.
Wait, I thought we already established that our minds are systems. How does reconstruction add to that understanding?
Well, we often think of our minds as being made up of these separate modules, right? One for language, one for memory, one for visual processing. But if that's all there is, how do these separate modules work together so seamlessly to create this sense of a coherent me?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like we experience the world as a unified whole, not as a bunch of disjointed perceptions and thoughts.
Exactly. And Bogdan suggests that reconstruction plays a key role in creating this sense of unity. As we weave together these complex narratives about other people's minds, we're also weaving together our own mental experiences. We're creating a sense of continuity and coherence for ourselves.
So the very act of trying to understand other people is actually helping us understand ourselves.
That's a really insightful way to put it. And this brings us full circle to metamentation. Because as we become more adept at reconstructing these complex social narratives, we're also becoming more adept at reflecting on our own internal mental processes. We're developing that mind within a mind that allows us to observe, analyze, and even direct our own thinking.
That's a powerful insight. It makes you realize that metamentation isn't just some abstract philosophical concept. It's something that emerges from our everyday social interactions.
Precisely. And it's this grounding in the social that makes metamentation such a powerful and uniquely human ability. But to really grasp the full scope of metamentation, we need to explore how another uniquely human ability, language, plays a critical role in shaping and refining those metacognitive skills.
Language, huh? I always thought of language as a tool for communication. How does it connect to thinking about thinking?
That's a question Bogdan explores in depth. He argues that language isn't just a means of conveying information, it's a powerful tool for representing and manipulating our own thoughts.
Okay, I can see that. Words give us labels for our thoughts, which allows us to categorize them, talk about them, analyze them in a more systematic way.
Exactly. But Bogdan goes even further. He suggests that the very structure of language might have actually influenced how we conceptualize our own minds.
Whoa, now that's a bold claim.
Yeah.
How could the structure of language shape how we think about thinking?
Well, think about how language is structured. It's built up of these discrete units, words, that can be combined and recombined in an infinite number of ways.
Right, that's what makes language so powerful. It's flexibility and creativity.
Exactly. And Bogdan proposes that this structure, this combination of distinct units, might have influenced how we view our own thoughts. We may have started to think of our thoughts as being made up of distinct units as well, mirroring the structure of language.
So it's like language provided the blueprint for understanding our own internal mental architecture.
That's the idea. And there's a growing body of research that's exploring this connection. One area of particular interest is inner speech, that little voice we all have in our heads.
Oh, you mean that voice that's constantly narrating my life, second-guessing my decisions, and reminding me to pick up milk on the way home?
That's the one. And Bogdan suggests that inner speech isn't just a byproduct of language, it's a key mechanism for metamentation.
So you're saying that talking to ourselves in our heads is actually helping us develop our ability to think about thinking.
Exactly. Inner speech allows us to externalize our thoughts, to examine them more objectively, and to manipulate them more easily.
It's like we're giving ourselves a mental pep talk or maybe a mental scolding, depending on what we're thinking about.
Precisely. Inner speech provides us with a tool for self-regulation and self-reflection. It's like having a built-in therapist, coach, and critic all rolled into one.
That's an interesting way to think about it. But if language is so crucial for meditation, does that mean that people who don't have language can't think about thinking?
That's a complex question and one that researchers are still actively exploring. While language definitely provides us with powerful tools for metacognition, it's likely not the only path. There's evidence suggesting that prelinguistic children and even some non-human animals exhibit some forms of metacognitive awareness.
So it's possible that there are different pathways to meditation, some that lean heavily on language, while others utilize different cognitive mechanisms.
Exactly. And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of metamentation, its connection to consciousness.
Consciousness. Okay, now we're venturing into some really deep territory. How does consciousness even factor into all of this?
Well, Bogdan argues that our ability to think about our own thinking is inextricably linked to our conscious awareness.
Meaning, we wouldn't be able to reflect on our thoughts if we weren't conscious of them in the first place.
I got it. Consciousness is like the spotlight that illuminates our mental stage. It allows us to not only have thoughts, but to be aware of them as they're happening.
Okay, I think I follow you. But how does this relate to everything we've been discussing? Interpretation, inner speech, reconstruction. Are all these processes happening consciously?
To a large extent, yes. We're consciously attending to social cues, making inferences, forming hypotheses about other people's mental states. All of this feeds into our developing capacity for metamentation.
So it's like our conscious minds are constantly working overtime to make sense of the social world. And by doing that, they're actually developing the ability to reflect on themselves.
Precisely. Which raises a really fascinating question. What's the nature of this conscious awareness that makes metamentation possible?
Ooh, okay, now we're getting philosophical. Is there even an answer to that question?
Bogdan doesn't claim to have all the answers, but he explores some interesting ideas. One perspective he offers is that consciousness might not be some mysterious, ethereal phenomenon. It might actually be a product of our brain's ability to represent information in a very specific way.
So you're saying that consciousness is somehow rooted in the physical structure of our brains.
That's one way to think about it. As our brains evolve to handle more and more complex information, especially social information, they might have developed the ability to not only represent the world around us, but also our own internal states.
So like our brains became self-aware.
Exactly. Now, Bogdan suggests there are different levels of consciousness. There's the basic level that allows us to experience the world, to have sensations, perceptions, emotions. But then there's a higher level that allows us to actually reflect on those experiences, to think about our own thinking.
So basic consciousness lets us be aware of things. And metaconsciousness lets us be aware of being aware. Mind-blowing.
I know, right? It's like a mind within a mind within a mind, and it's this metaconsciousness that is really essential for metamentation.
I think I'm starting to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
But how does this metaconsciousness actually work? What's happening in our brains that allows us to have this higher level of awareness?
The book doesn't provide a definitive answer, but it does explore some intriguing theories. One is that metaconsciousness arises from the interaction of different brain regions. It's not like there's a single consciousness center in our brains.
Oh, so consciousness is more like a symphony than a solo performance.
Exactly. Multiple brain areas working together to create this complex experience. And one idea is that these different regions communicate through a process called reentrant signaling, where they share information and influence each other's activity.
So they're having a conversation, essentially.
Yeah.
Different parts of the brain exchanging information, debating ideas, coming to conclusions.
You got it. Bogdan suggests that this ongoing conversation between different brain regions creates the dynamic, ever-changing flow of our conscious experience. And through this intricate interplay, we become aware of ourselves, our thoughts, and our place in the world.
This is incredible. So we've got interpretation, inner speech, reconstruction, and consciousness all playing a role in this grand symphony of metamentation. But I have a feeling we're not done yet. There must be more to this story.
You're right. There's one more crucial element to consider, one that sheds light on the intricacies of metamentation's development autism.
Autism. Okay, I'm definitely interested to hear more about this connection, but I also want to make sure we're approaching this topic with sensitivity and respect.
Absolutely. The book emphasizes that autism offers valuable insights into the typical development of metamentation. It's not about pathologizing autism, it's about recognizing that the challenges autistic individuals often face with social interaction and interpretation can provide us with a deeper understanding of how these processes work in all of us.
So it's not that autistic individuals lack intelligence, it's that they process social information differently.
Hmm.
And this difference can impact their ability to understand other minds and ultimately their own.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that these very challenges highlight the crucial role of interpretation in developing metamentation.
I'm all ears. How does autism shed light on the importance of interpretation?
The book points out that autistic individuals often rely more heavily on public representations to understand social situations and mental states, things like photos, diagrams, or written rules.
That makes sense. It's like they need a more concrete external representation to grasp those internal processes.
Precisely. And this actually strengthens the argument that interpreting other minds, that subtle, intuitive process of reading social cues and inferring mental states, is absolutely essential for developing a more abstract, internal representation of thought.
So for some autistic individuals, that step of interpreting other minds might be more challenging because of how they process social information. And this highlights just how intricate and nuanced the process of metamentation really is.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a really important point. There isn't just one way to think about thinking. There are many different paths, each with its own strengths and challenges. We need to appreciate that diversity of cognitive styles.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize that metamentation isn't just a cognitive ability, it's also deeply intertwined with our moral and ethical development.
That's a great point. Think about it. Medimentation gives us the ability to step outside of our immediate desires and impulses and truly consider the perspectives of others. It's a key ingredient for empathy and compassion.
Right. We talked about that earlier, that the concept of false beliefs, understanding that other people can have different viewpoints even if we disagree with them.
Exactly. And Bogdan suggests that this ability to consider other perspectives, which meditation allows, is crucial for making moral judgments, for understanding the impact of our actions on others, for developing a sense of responsibility.
So metamentation isn't just about understanding our own minds, it's about understanding our place in the world, our relationships with others, our responsibilities as human beings.
Beautifully said. And this brings us full circle to the power of interpretation. It's through interpretation, that constant effort to understand the minds around us, that we develop the capacity for meditation and ultimately moral reasoning and ethical behavior. It all starts with that basic human need to connect with each other.
It's incredible how much our social nature shapes us, not just emotionally, but intellectually and morally as well. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but wonder about something that's been on my mind. How does all this relate to our increasingly digital world? Does spending so much time online affect our ability to think about thinking?
That's a great question, and one that Bogdan addresses in the book. He raises some thought-provoking points about the potential impact of technology on our metacognitive abilities.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of impact are we talking about?
Well, Bogdan points out that many of our digital interactions just lack the richness and complexity of face-to-face interactions. Emojis and text messages can only convey so much. Even video calls don't quite capture the nuances of being in the same room with someone.
It's true. It's like something gets lost in translation when we're communicating through screens.
Exactly. And he suggests that this lack of social nuance might have some unintended consequences for the development of meditation.
So you're saying that spending too much time in the digital world might actually hinder our ability to think about thinking.
It's a possibility worth considering. Now, the book doesn't make any definitive claims, but it does raise some important questions about the potential trade-offs of our increasing reliance on technology.
It's a good reminder to be mindful of how we're using technology and to make sure we're still getting those rich face-to-face interactions that challenge our brains and help us develop those metacognitive muscles.
I agree. Technology isn't inherently good or bad, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used in ways that enhance or diminish our cognitive abilities. The key is to be aware and make conscious choices that support our cognitive well-being.
This entire conversation has been eye-opening. I'm starting to see metamentation everywhere in my relationships, my work, even my own internal dialogues. It's amazing how much insight we can gain just by understanding these concepts.
I know, right? They give us a new lens for viewing the world and ourselves.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What's the big picture here, from interpreting minds to navigating the digital age?
I think one of the most profound takeaways is that metamentation, this seemingly abstract, uniquely human ability, is deeply rooted in our social nature. It suggests that our ability to think about thinking, to reflect on our own minds, might have actually emerged from our early attempts to understand the minds of others.
It's like our social world isn't just a source of information and support. It's shaping the very way we think.
It really is. And that underscores the importance of social connection for our cognitive development. Those face-to-face interactions, they're not just enjoyable, they're crucial for honing those interpretive skills and nurturing our metacognitive growth.
But we also need to be mindful of how our digital interactions might be affecting our metacognitive abilities and take steps to ensure we're engaging in activities that challenge and stimulate our minds. It's all about balance, right?
Absolutely. And remember, the human mind is incredibly complex and adaptive. It's constantly evolving, responding to new challenges and opportunities. And while we've made progress in understanding how metamentation works, there's still so much more to discover.
I love that. Always more to explore within the vast landscapes of our own minds. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the origins of metamentation to its connection to language and consciousness, even its potential challenges in the digital age. What a journey.
It's been an amazing exploration, and to really bring it all home, there's one final perspective to consider, one that gets to the heart of what metamentation means for us as human beings.
All right, I'm ready for that final piece of the puzzle. Let's dive in. Okay, so we've journeyed through the evolution of metamentation, from interpreting others to the impact of language and technology. Now, what's that final perspective, that core idea that ties everything together?
Throughout this exploration, we've seen how deeply intertwined metamentation is with our social nature, our capacity for language, even our consciousness. But Bogdan highlights one more dimension, and it's profound, the connection between metamentation and our very humanity.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. How does thinking about thinking connect to what makes us human?
Bogdan makes this argument that metamentation isn't simply a cognitive tool. He sees it as being at the very core of our capacity for self-awareness, for moral reasoning, for creativity, all those things we view as essential to the human experience.
So you're saying it's not just about having this mind within a mind, it's about how that inner mind actually shapes who we are, how we interact with the world, how we relate to each other.
Exactly. Metamentation allows us to step back and examine our own beliefs, question our assumptions, and imagine different perspectives. It gives us the ability to move beyond our own limited viewpoints and connect with something much larger than ourselves.
It's like meditation is the bridge between our inner world and the outer world, helping us understand our place in the grand scheme of things.
What a beautiful way to put it. And this highlights why Bogdan believes metamentation is so vital for moral and ethical development. It's not just about knowing right from wrong, it's about having the capacity to truly reflect on our motivations, to think about the consequences of our actions, and to genuinely empathize with others.
It sounds like meditation gives us the mental tools we need to navigate the complexities of human relationships and ultimately make choices that are aligned with our values.
Precisely. And through this ongoing process of reflection, of self-examination, of trying to understand not just our own minds, but the minds of others, that's how we truly become more fully human.
Wow. This entire deep dive has been such an incredible experience. We've explored the origins of meditation, the connections to language and consciousness, the potential challenges in the digital world, and now this profound link to our humanity. What an amazing journey.
It's been a true pleasure sharing these ideas with you. And if there's just one thing I hope our listeners take away from this, it's this. The journey of metamentation is lifelong. It's a continuous process of discovery, of growth, of expanding our understanding of ourselves and the world we live in.
And the most amazing thing is, we're all in this together. Every interaction, every conversation, every moment of reflection, it's all an opportunity to deepen those metacognitive abilities and connect more fully with our own humanity.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of metamentation, I want to encourage all our listeners to keep those minds buzzing, keep asking those questions, and keep exploring the incredible potential that resides within each and every one of us.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this mental adventure. And to our listeners, until next time, keep diving deep.